David persisted. No, I want to see how big my army is. I want to know how strong I am. Go number my troops. There was a bad stand for the nation's leader to say, God, you haven't won the victories. I've won the victories. As a result of that stand by David, a plague came on the entire nation, and in Jerusalem alone, 70,000 people were wiped out in one day. You see, a nation does account and will either suffer or be blessed for the stands of its leaders. This is why the founders were so emphatic about keeping men in office who understood God's principles. And perhaps the most famous speech ever delivered by Benjamin Franklin, delivered on Thursday, June the 28th, 1787, on the floor of the Constitutional Convention, Franklin reminded the delegates that we needed God to be our friend, not our enemy. We needed Him to be our ally, not our adversary. We needed to make sure that we kept, as Franklin called it, His concurring aid. Franklin warned, if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without His notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without His aid? He said, we've been assured in the sacred writing that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. And thus Franklin called for regular daily prayer to make sure that we kept God in the midst of what we were doing in the nation. Jefferson, too, understood this principle. Jefferson declared, and can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God, that they are not to be violated but with His wrath? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that His justice cannot sleep forever. A nation does answer to God for the stands it takes. Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, overheard someone in the White House state that he hoped that God was on our side in the battle, that God was on the Union side. Lincoln, showing that he understood the principle of national accountability, replied, Sir, I'm not at all concerned about that, for I know that the Lord is always on the side of the right. But it is my constant anxiety and prayer that I and this nation should be on the Lord's side. This understanding of national accountability to God has been part of our heritage, part of our history. Our founders understood that a nation needed to take stands which lined up with God's principles so that God's blessings and His concurring aid, as Franklin described it, could rest on the nation. Elias Boudinot, who served as president of the Continental Congress, made a recommendation which sums up what must again happen in America. He said, let us enter on this important business under the idea that we are Christians on whom the eyes of the world are now turned. Let us in the first place humbly and penitently implore the aid of the Almighty God whom we profess to serve. Let us earnestly call and beseech Him for Christ's sake to preside in our councils. He was saying, do you want to be a world's leader? Then put Christian principles in your public affairs. Recall Charles Finney? Finney said, the church must take right ground in regard to politics. Politics are a part of a religion in a country as this, and Christians must do their duty to the country as part of their duty to God. God will bless or curse this nation according to the course Christians take in politics. Why is this true? Can a nation be blessed apart from God's principles? No. But where do God's principles reside? They reside in the hearts and the lives of God's people. If God's people do not get involved, God's principles do not get involved. The ungodly will not run a nation by godly principles, and God can't bless ungodly principles. That's why the church has to take right ground. That's why the founders were so emphatic about keeping Christian men in office, an emphasis evident from the first Supreme Court justices to the individual state constitutions. Today, we cannot afford to be isolationist. We can't say, I'm not going to get involved. We must realize that we need to get involved, for God's principles do not enter any arena on their own. They enter only through God's people. Proverbs 18:1 says, a man who isolates himself seeks his own desires. He rages against all wise judgment. The founders used to teach their young people, do you want to do something good for God? Then be a senator, be a judge, a congressman, a doctor, a lawyer, a missionary, or a pastor. But get out there where you can affect people with God's principles. But in the 1940s and the 1950s, we began to say in America, young people, do you want to do something good for God? Then be a missionary or be a pastor, but don't get involved in politics. When we started getting out, we handed the system over to ungodly principles. We've got to get involved again. We have to come to grips with the fact that separation of church and state, as we have it today, is not in the teaching of the Founding Fathers. It is not a historical teaching, and it is not a teaching of law until recent years. We also have to realize that the current version of separation of church and state is not a biblical teaching. Separation says, okay, Christians, we recognize that you're the light of the world, just don't get out of the church. Don't shine on anything outside the church. Or Christians, we recognize you're the salt of the earth, but don't get out of the shaker. You see, separation of church and state says you can be salt and you can be light, but only inside the four walls of the church. That's not scriptural. We can't do that. We further need to recognize the fact that there is going to be someone's religion in schools and in government. For example, in 1961, in the case Torcaso v. Watkins, and again in 1985, the courts ruled that secular humanism was a legitimate religion, equivalent to Christianity under the law. Secular humanism, by the court's recognition, is a viable First Amendment religion. Now, secular humanism has a religious philosophy which very simply says that God has no place in their philosophy. It is a religious philosophy based on men, not on God. The court has recognized it as a religion. In 1977, in the cases Theriault v. Silber and Malnick v. Yogi, the court said that atheism was a religion. But how can atheism be a religion if it doesn't believe in God? Whatever you believe with all of your heart, whatever affects the way that you act, whatever you believe so strongly that it changes your behavior, that is your religion. So what is the religion of atheists? The religion of atheists, the thing that affects the way they behave, is that they believe with all their heart that there should be no religious practice. Therefore, the religion of atheism is the religion of practicing no religious practice. It is religiously practicing non-religion. Furthermore, people may now give contributions to satanic groups and get the same tax deductions as people who give contributions to Christian churches. But consider, when do we hear separation of church and state? Have you seen anyone go into a school at Halloween and say, wait, get those witches down off the wall, separation of church and state, I demand separation, witchcraft is a legal organized religion? Or have you seen anyone go into public schools and say, now wait, I don't see any prayer here, I don't see any Bible reading here, there's no religious practice here, that means it's a religion of atheism here, I demand separation of church and state, get the religion of atheism out. No, we don't hear that. When do we hear separation of church and state? Anytime there's an attempt to involve Christian principles. Separation of church and state is the big club pulled out to beat back the Christians. We have lost ground in recent years as we've lost our understanding of the founders' intents and teachings. We do have a godly heritage in America, but we've been robbed by the 3%. Separation of church and state, as we have it today, is not a biblical teaching. It is not a teaching of the Founding Fathers. It is not a historical teaching, and it is not a teaching of law until recent years. The 3% has taken away our heritage. We've lost sight of it. We have to get involved and take it back. A godly heritage is the foundation of America, and the church must take right ground. We must recover the things that we've given up in recent years. We must get involved.
Experience more of America's rich spiritual history through the award-winning videos, books, audio tapes, and other exciting materials available to you from Wallbuilders. The powerful video, The Spiritual Heritage of the United States Capitol, brings to life the exciting history of our nation's most cherished landmark. Featuring the only complete Capitol tour footage in existence, plus dramatic historical reenactments, it's an unforgettable journey through great events and lives that help shape our nation. Keys to Good Government provides valuable insights from great leaders in American history on the desperate need for integrity in the lives of public officials. For a different view of the Revolutionary War, see The Spirit of the American Revolution. You'll learn of miracles that happened in battle and discover the true inspiration for victory. Education and the Founding Fathers examines the beliefs of our early leaders on the use of the Bible in schools, at odds with the prevailing notions held by many educators today. The Foundations of American Government takes a look at the powerful effect of biblical principles at work in public life and the statistical downturn our country has made in the absence of these ideals. All of these titles are available on audio cassette, as are a number of other presentations by David Barton. In addition, don't miss these Wallbuilders book titles: America, To Pray or Not to Pray, Benjamin Rush, Original Intent, and The Bulletproof George Washington. And reprints such as Ethics, an Early American Handbook, Lives of the Signers, Noah Webster's Advice to the Young, the 1777 New England Primer, Documents of Freedom, and many others. Also take a look at Wallbuilders' Great Americans poster series. All are available at P.O. Box 397, Aledo, Texas 76008, or call 817-441-6044 for more information. To place an order, call 1-800-873-2845 and visit our website at wallbuilders.com.